Hello, and welcome to the second webinar of our Supporting Father Involvement and Co-Parenting webinar series. I'm Joshua Sparrow and Director at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center, where you can find more virtual learning opportunities in our webinar series on family engagement, mental health in COVID-19 times, and much, much more, including how to deliver your services to families online. All you have to do is go to the brazeltontouchpoints.org website and click on the webinars tab, and you'll find the registration forms there. Thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, I want to be sure to thank our fabulous production team at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center, Autumn Strasbaugh, Kayla Savelli, and Ashley Gaddis, and to thank our wonderful presenters from the Supporting Father Involvement Program. You'll be hearing more about them in just a moment. This is our second of this webinar series on how we can better engage fathers in their children's lives and help strengthen co-parenting and family relationships. It looks like many of you were able to join for the first webinar. But if you didn't, you can find the recording on our website. Again, it's brazeltontouchpoints.org on our YouTube page. Looks like we've got 63% of you who responded, who were here for the first one, and we've got 37% who are new to this, but you can go back and look at the first one if you like, and I'm sure we'll have more people joining in the next couple of minutes. We've got lots of people attending today's webinar, so let's take a look at what you all do. Now, with our little Mentimeter, you can click on the link, and when you click on the link, you'll be able to tell us what you do. There we go. So, it looks like we've got lots of people who do all kinds of things. I'm not going to be able to name them all, but home visitors, parent educators, family advocates, family support specialists, teachers, social workers, clinicians, family engagement coaches, and so many more. Welcome to you all. We're so glad that you're here, and it's great to find out a little bit about what you do. Aren't these beautiful psychologists I see in there now? Director and coach and the engagement specialist is so wonderful. Don't you love these word clouds? I just think they're the greatest thing. But I wish we could see all of you. Before we start, here are a few housekeeping details. If you're having difficulty viewing the webinar, you can watch it live on our Facebook page. This is what you do. Just search for the Brazelton Touchpoint Center in Facebook. And the live stream video of this webinar will be pinned to the top of our page. Today's webinar is providing live Spanish translation for participants who would like it. And I want to be sure to thank our wonderful interpreter, Maria Jose Gutierrez. To access the translation, click on the interpretation icon in your Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen, then select Spanish. To mute the English in the background, you can select Mute Original Audio. La conversación de hoy será en español e inglés. En los controles de su reunión, haga clic en Interpretación. Haga clic en el idioma que le gustaría escuchar. Para escuchar solo el español, haga clic en Silenciar Audio Original. Today's webinar includes a chat box and a Q&A box. A lot of you know the drill there. So please use the chat feature if you have a comment to share And be sure to choose all panelists and attendees if you'd like us all to know what you're thinking. And we love to hear from you. If you have a specific question for the presenters, if you could, please try to remember to enter your question into the Q&A. Our wonderful panelists and interpreter have agreed to hang out here for an extra 15 minutes after the top of the hour. So if you can stay, we'll have time for more questions and a couple of bonus videos that we're eager to have as many of you see as can stay. Later today or tomorrow, you will receive a thank you email with a link to a recording of today's webinar and a link to our feedback survey. You can also access the recording on our YouTube channel and our website. Please complete the survey so that we can mail you your certificate of attendance. Everybody always asks for those. And if you have any technical problems during the webinar, please select panelists only when you use the chat box to let us know, or you can email Kayla Savelli. Kayla Savelli's email address is posted in the chat. And now, let me introduce you to today's wonderful presenters. Deutron Kebebew, founder and executive director of Mentors, that's capital MEN, Mentors, driving change for boys, men, and dads in Santa Cruz County, is a father, husband, and mentor to fathers, father figures, and young people, over 4,000 of them over the past 15 years. Deutron managed and directed the Supporting Father Involvement evidence-based clinical research project for over a decade in Santa Cruz, in partnership with the University of California, Berkeley, and Yale University, and has over 15 years of experience implementing the Supporting Father Involvement curriculum, which you'll hear more about today. Carolyn Pape Cowan, professor of psychology emerita at the University of California, Berkeley, has over 40 years of experience evaluating family strengthening interventions with parents from diverse settings and income levels, and is one of the 4 designers and consultants of the Supporting Father Involvement Parents as Partners program. She publishes widely in the literature on family transitions, interventions, and family policy. And with our next guest, Philip Cowan, is co-author of When Partners Become Parents and The Family Context of Parenting and the Child's Adaptation to School, both of which I'm sure will be of interest to so many of you, given what you've told us you all do. Phil Cowan, also professor of psychology emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley, has also served there as director of the clinical psychology program and the Institute of Human Development. He is co-director of 3 longitudinal preventive intervention projects with Carolyn, and like Carolyn, he is author of numerous scientific articles, and with Carolyn, as well as Marcia and Kyle Pruitt, whom you met if you joined us for our first webinar in this series. Phil is also one of the 4 designers and consultants of the Supporting Father Involvement Parents as Partners program, which is conducted in diverse communities in the United States and also in the UK, Canada, Malta, and Israel. Thank you so much, Deutron, Carolyn, and Phil, for joining us today. And thank you everybody for being with us here. So let's go over to you, Phil and Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you to Touchpoints for inviting us to feature our intervention work over these 3 webinars. So last month, some of you already know this, our colleagues Marcia and Kyle Pruitt and one of the directors of one of our California county sites, Armando Alcaraz, introduced you to the Supporting Father Involvement program and our attempts to bring fathers and the relationship between the parents into our work with families to foster their children's development and well-being, and of course the parents' development as well. So today we'll be telling you a little more about that, and we'll be describing the different intervention trials where we did systematic evaluations in a number of different sites, and along with Deutron, who was also one of our directors in the California project for many years, we'll show you some details of the curriculum and tell you a little bit about how we think it works and share some of the results with you. First, let us each, the 3 of us, just mention how we came to the Supporting Father Involvement work. Phil and I, in the early 1970s, had moved from Canada to California, leaving most of our family and support systems behind, willingly, happily. But in the early 70s, with 3 young children and 2 young careers, we began to experience strains in our relationship as a couple, which was totally unexpected. But over the next few years, as the families around us started to separate and divorce at a rate that was really frightening, we began to realize that we weren't the only ones facing this strain. And as we looked for information in the literature, in books, in articles, we couldn't find anything that talked about this for couples. And the couples we knew weren't talking about it at all. So it came as a surprise. So that led in the mid-70s to Phil and I starting the Becoming a Family project, where we experimented basically with bringing couples together in small groups with trained facilitators when they were really at the end of their very first pregnancy, expecting their first child, trying to get in early. And we followed those families until their children made the transition to elementary school and kindergarten. And based on the results of that, we got funding again from the National Institute of Mental Health and started the School Children and Their Families project with another 100 families whose first child was about to make the transition to kindergarten. And we followed those families systematically with groups and random assignment, sometimes to no groups, so we could compare. And we followed them until those children had made the transition to high school. So it's been a lot of years doing that. And then based on that earlier work, we moved to the Supporting Father Involvement Project, and Phil will tell you about the origin of that.
Well, what happened was that the California Office of Child Abuse, as it says up there, asked the Pruitts and us. They were really interested in prevention. They were really interested in trying to work with low-income families, families who were in some forms of distress, in order to prevent child abuse and some of the things that follow from that, the negative things that follow from that. And they asked us to design a study, which with the Pruitts we did. They wanted to move beyond mother-child interventions. And we wanted the logo for the program to look more like the next slide. Could you move to the next slide? So this is a back up one. Back up to the slide of the sculpture, which was by Ruth Block, an Israeli sculptor. Now, one of the things to make sure that we deal with is the notion that this is a heterosexual couple, but we will be in the Supporting Father Involvement Project. We know that there have been couples who are same-sex parents, who are non-romantic parents, and so the project applies to a variety of family forms. Now we can go to the next slide. So what we have been doing in the Supporting Father Involvement Project is that we've done, and we're not going to tell you about all of them right now, 7 research trials, more than 1,500 co-parenting teams. And again, as I said, they're married, they're living together, they're divorced, same-sex couples in the countries that Josh mentioned, many backgrounds, many ethnicities, many different countries. And so that's why we're here. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing, what we've been finding, why fathers and couples are very important when our eye is on the welfare of the kids. Deutron, do you want to also say how you got into this business?
Sure. First, I want to thank the Cowans. I feel like they're my adopted grandparents, who both professionally but in life. I got involved with the SFI project in 2006. I have been one of the longest serving project director. But the way I got in was that I was doing work with foster youth. And the more I read, one of the most common factor that I started to see with foster youth was the absence of the father from the home when kids were removed or challenges in life. So that kind of led me to SFI. And also, I think, and in a sneaky way, my own father wasn't in my life. So there was something about this project and also being a research project that really attracted me to participate and engage. And I want to just share a little bit of a story about one of my coworker that started the project 6 months before me and just divorced early. And she was very adamant when we started the project that how she wasn't going to let the father of her child be involved. And if he was, she was going to gatekeep as much as possible. But throughout the project, the evolution that I have seen of myself and my team was that we all ended up becoming really father-friendly and mother-friendly. So this project is not just a research project. As you do the work, you're gonna see a transformation that will take place in your own life. So Phil, I'll give back to you.
Thanks. You're right, Deutron. This is really both a professional and a personal endeavor for all of us. One of the things that we're concerned about, next slide, is that fathers for a long time were missing in many. Can we back up one? That fathers were missing. For example, in government programs, you have maternal and child health programs. Fathers are only involved in child support programs. In parenting books are really addressed mostly until recently to mothers, and parenting programs are attended mostly by mothers. And the research until very, very recently in psychology and social welfare and social work, again, the focus has been on mothers as parents. One example is in a book of 1,000 pages on a manual of child development in the 1960s, the word father wasn't even in the index. So there was a lot of ignoring of fathers, as I say, until about the 1980s or 90s. And then people began to be concerned that fathers were missing in many different ways. And so they started, for example, programs to advertise to try and persuade fathers. So we have a video of that.
Something about you, baby, I can't get enough. There's something about you, baby. I got you looking at me.
Okay.
There's something about you, baby. I can't get enough. There's something about you, baby. I got you looking at me. I'm gonna call you bluff. There's something about you.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. It takes a man to be a dad.
I don't know how much that enticed fathers, but it was certainly a cute video. Now back to the slides. I just want to mention briefly, and Marcia and Kyle also mentioned last time, about the fact that in the last 20 years or so, there have been many, in the next slide, many positive benefits of father involvement. I want to make the point that we're not talking about abusive fathers. We're not saying that kids have to have a father in the home to grow up well. Lots of kids grow up well without fathers, but having a second parent really does help. It does make a difference. It makes a difference to the kids' development. It makes a difference to the mothers. It makes even a difference to the dad's health and well-being. And that's true if it's not a male parent, if it's a same-sex parent, if it's a non-romantic parent. There's a benefit to having a second concerned parent in the home. Now, we can talk about the research, but we thought it was really important to bring the children in and the voices of the children. So Sam Kaufman, who was a filmmaker in Boston, made a 20-minute film, and we're going to show you just a little bit of it, called Show Your Love, where he interviewed a bunch of kids, various kids, some who had fathers in the home and some who didn't. And we want you to listen to it and think about, well, what message you might take from this back to your work, or even personally, what message do you get from these kids' voices?
What things would you do if your father was around more?
I'd be happier, a lot happier, and I think I'd do better in school, because it's like my father's just that type of person to give somebody a burst of confidence. It's just like he's there. As long as he's there, I'm happy. But I love my mother too, but it's just my father gives me something extra.
What kind of things would you do if your father was around more?
I'd probably study a lot more and do a lot more schoolwork, because my mom would be home instead of working.
Would you be a different person if your father lived with you? Like, how would that make you different in the way you
I might be a stronger person, because I might have a lot more support from both of them together. I'd be more stable, I think, having a family life. A lot of things would probably worked out better for me, because I would have been stable. And it's hard to think about it.
Yeah. Would you be a different person if you had a father living with you?
Yeah.
Why? What would make you different?
If my father was living with us, it'd be better, because he knows how to do stuff right, and then I can be following in his footsteps.
You get in trouble a lot?
Yeah,
For what?
like all kinds of dumb stuff.
What else would you want a father to do? What would you want your father to do?
Just do things, hang out, and just like do things at home, so I don't have to be like out all the time.
You out all the time?
Not all the time, but sometimes I'm outside or hanging out with something.
Are there other men who are important to you, like an uncle, grandfather, teacher, neighbor?
My brothers.
Your brothers?
Mm-hmm.
Who's the most important man in your life?
Grown-up man.
Who's the most grown-up man? Yeah, adult man.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather? Why? What's he do?
He's like, if my mother needs help with us, she'll call him first, and she'll tell him first that what we're doing and stuff, and he'll talk to us and stuff.
If you could give all the fathers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Just to show your love to your children. Because you have to love them. They're your children, they're your own flesh and blood, but you have to show your love. To let them know how much you care about them. Because if you don't show it, then they don't know it's there. And they can't feel that love that you should be giving them. They don't get it in return if you don't show it. It's kind of a hard question. I don't really know exactly. But I think that's something that matters if you show the love.
That tear just kills me every time I see it. Josh, do you want to help get some reactions from people?
Sure, Phil. I think we were wondering if you'd all be willing to just put into the chat which of these young people in the video do you most connect with, if anything? And also, if you're willing to say, just put in the chat, is there one thing you heard one of them say that stuck out for you and that you will take with you after this webinar today and maybe remember in your work or in the rest of your life? All the kids show love. Whoa. The last young woman, dads just need to show their love. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one really stuck with me too. And that is something that a lot of you are mentioning. The grandfather male figure in children's lives. Yeah. The gift of time with their children. I feel for the boys most in this video as a mother of 5 boys. From the mouth of babes, so powerful. That dads give them something extra beyond what mothers give. If my dad was here, I would be doing my schoolwork. Yeah. Yeah. All of them, since I was raised by my mom. Yeah. And that's one of the things you were saying, Deutron, and you too, Phil, is that this personal work for all of us, right? We all,
for sure.
Yeah.
And takes us into the lives of kids that we might not meet otherwise, but the messages are so clear from them. In the longer film, which is by Sam Kaufman, Kauffman, at Boston University, there are many more kids featured, and some of them have had fathers in their lives and talk about how important that was to them as well. Well, I'm glad it moved some of you clearly, as it has moved us and anyone we've shown it to. So Phil talked about the fact that fathers were missing, especially in studies and writings about children's development and well-being. The other thing that was missing, if we could have the next slide, is the relationship between the parents, the couple or the co-parenting. If we could have that slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things that happens in parenting classes and family service agencies, and many of you will know this from your own work, though we're happy to hear counter examples, is that they work primarily with mothers, and mothers are thought of as the key to children's development and well-being. But here's what we know, and a lot of what we're talking about today comes from research by many, many people over the years since the 70s, and a lot of it from our own research. We know that unresolved conflict between parents increases the probability that children and adolescents will display more aggression or depression, or both, whether their parents are living together or living separately. We also know that couple relationship quality affects the father's involvement in all kinds of families. For example, the better the relationship between the two parents, the more likely the father is to be positively involved in the care of his child or the children. So our focus in our program on fathers and the relationship between the parents and their 3 generational histories, which we spend some time on to think about the background to what it is they're trying to do, is what makes our approach different from typical parenting classes. And then one of the things we've found is that there are great advantages of working with parents in groups, especially in industrialized societies. There are so many nuclear families that are more isolated in ways that, like our own experience when our children were young, people were not talking about what was going on really in their intimate relationships in their families, and they weren't talking mostly about the strain. And what we found is that a group with trained leaders can provide a safe environment that allows parents to really dig in and explore where their own family values and goals are coming from based on their culture and their personalities and so on. And what we find is that the groups act as normalizers in a way that after a lot of discussion, these groups go on for 16 weeks, as we'll say, most of the members come to the conclusion that, you know, we're all in the same boat. We have different families and some different issues, but a lot of us are feeling challenged. And it takes away a lot of the stigma that some of them have felt either from being poor or from having struggles as a couple and thinking they need to hide that or they won't look like accomplished parents. So the ideas behind this intervention, as you are hearing, is that the risks for child abuse and neglect and domestic violence will be reduced if the parents are healthier as individuals, if they feel more effective as a couple or as co-parents, if they feel their parenting is effective, and we spend quite some time on parenting strategies and what you can expect of children of different ages. And if they appreciate the roots of their values as partners and parents, in other words, where are their goals coming from? What are they trying to repeat and what are they trying to change in the families they're creating now? And if we can also help them find and use support when they're stressed. So these are the things that our program is trying to do. So the intervention curriculum, which Marcia and Kyle went into a little bit, but I'm going to repeat a little bit of it, especially for those of you who are new. The groups are led by trained male-female teams of leaders or facilitators. We interview every couple before the groups begin to make sure that they're a good fit for this program, that they'll be safe working together with us. The groups meet for 2 hours every week for 16 weeks. So that's 4 months. It's quite a long time, but it gives us time to explore much of the content that we're alluding to. And the content is presented in structured discussions, in little teaching segments. We tell them about the research we're aware of, and especially in exercises and activities that bring these concepts alive. And Deutron's going to share a few of those with you very briefly in a few minutes. And to foster fathers' involvement with the children, which is one of the key issues in this program, in weeks 5 and 13 of the 16 weeks, the dads meet in one room with their youngest child, with the male co-facilitator, in supervised activities, and the children range in age from tiny infants to young children, typically. And the mothers meet separately with the female co-leader in a different room, talking about what it's like to let their men in on the parenting picture. We provide food and snacks every week, and that means a lot to these families, especially if they're coming straight from work. We provide childcare if the children are old enough to be looked after in another room. And we have always used case managers as well, who help follow the families and help us with attendance and also with referrals to any other services that the families might need that this intervention can't address directly. So the next slide, please. What we say about this is it's not therapy and it's not open-ended psychoeducation where we're just trying to teach them skills with a single blueprint for family relationships. What we're trying to do is to help parents move closer to the kind of partners and parents they're hoping to be, taking into account their own culture, their family goals, and their particular personalities. And I think this is why it has worked for families in so many different configurations and now in so many different countries. So Deutron, I think at this point you were going to talk just a little bit about how these things align with the touch points principles, and then we'll move on to some of the examples you're going to share with people.
Perfect. Thank you, Cowan. So recruitment is one of those things all of you are gonna go ahead and struggle with fathers. I can tell you after doing this for 15 years, I still struggle with recruitment because there is a stigma that comes with parenting classes that we all send parents, because when something has happened in life, we don't encourage parents to go to parenting like we do to a driver's school or to a dancing class so they can become better at it. So there's that stigma when with fathers, they feel like they have to do this on their own. And as a current father of a toddler, what I can tell you is it really has shaped the way I approach recruitment. So I would think, would I go to this program and how would I want to connect with the father? So with that sense, we're going to address some of the recruitment issues that come up, but the way you approach recruitment will be different in every environment. Head Start parents will be different than child welfare parents, or probation fathers, or returning fathers to a community from a prison system. So every approach, you got to tailor it to the fathers. But in addition to that, if somebody's coming from a home where there was a father versus an absent father, or culturally, so it becomes really complex in the way we approach it. But once we get them in the door, is one of the exercises we do is that's part of both an assessment as well as in the first group is the pie exercise, where parents, both mom and dad, take a moment to kind of use a circle and divide that circle how they feel, where their time is going with household and parenting responsibilities. The moment they do that, it reveals, it's not that an idea they have, but now it's in a black and white paper that they can look at, and they sense, oh my God, work takes a lot of time, or parenting takes a little bit of my time, or personal time. So that kind of transitioned them to having a conversation. Do you really feel like I'm not doing anything about caring for our child? So it starts the discussion, and which leads us to who does what in the family, which is another exercise that we do with them. And it really starts to have a conversation within a group. It becomes a mini group of the couple set, where they're talking about who makes the meal, reading to the child, or changing diapers, depends on the age of the child, but it becomes a discussion point. And the funny thing is, every time I facilitate group, it reminds me to do one pie with my wife. I come home and I say, well, it's time to do a pie. And she's like, really? Is it that time? Yes, because it shifts. We're constantly shifting. And then the second part, what we're doing with them is we give them an opportunity to really imagine, if it was in an ideal world, what would they want it to look like? So there's a first pie of taking a snapshot of in the last week or last month, and a future pie. And a lot of the time, what you see, most of all with fathers, is reducing the amount of time they work. They want to spend more time with the family, on a couple relationship, and time with themselves. So it's a good way of getting them. And usually when we do a recruitment activity, this is one of the exercises I do with them. Then after that, they're like, wow, I thought you're going to tell me how to be a dad. This is different. You're actually inviting me to join something. So it kind of normalizes it. It's a great way of pulling them in. The other part is it also points out some of the conflict areas couples may have about responsibility and share of duty. Another area I want to go is a lot of discussion comes around intimate partner violence, or DV. For a lot of our families, until the third part of our phase, which the counts will talk about, we didn't work with families who had active domestic violence. Later on, we did. Even with that, we had a really good screening process in place. And one of the things we have done is, once we emphasize that the domestic violence is really a couple domain, and we move families away from that domain to the parent-child or the co-parenting domain, we have had families in our group where they had domestic violence 90 days ago, but actively in the group, with the group leaders really being informed, being cued, and how to handle. And we had arrangement where they leave, 15 minutes apart. So that way there's no conflict, but they were able to go through the group and participate. And what they have shared with us at the end is, I'm glad I came to this group because you have showed us how to separate and in a healthy way, rather than really having a messy breakup. So it really has a lot of great benefits and in this curriculum and how we have engaged co-parenting, couple relationship, and parent-child relationship. Let's see, is there anything else I'm missing, Josh? Anything coming up from the chat or the counts?
I think, Deutron, you were going to talk a little bit about working with different kinds of couples. It was at the end of the slide before. Who does
Sure.
what?
Okay. So the type, so for example, thank you, Carol. So in the room, you know, when we bring people together, they immediately, you know, empower the facilitator. Tell me what to do. I'm here, I'm engaged. And immediately with SFI, what you're going to realize is this is a co-created group. The facilitators are both teachers and students, and parents are invited to be both a teacher and a student. And in that process, we make sure in the group agreement, we communicate if you're a shy parent that, you know, we encourage you to talk. If you're, you know, you like to use the mic more often than other parents, please be aware this is for everybody. So it kind of creates equitable way of pulling in. And couples with a history of domestic violence, like I said, we're aware and we try to make sure, depending on the who's in the group, that there will be certain exercises about intimacy that we may not bring or we may have to modify, depends on who's in the group. So it really, as a facilitator, it's not one of those groups that you can show up and open a book and implement it. It does require a little bit of planning, but the movement, the pivoting, and the transformation work you do is incredible. And you know, you're gonna see once you see the curriculum, SFI is a really unique, but not just unique, but it's a holistic approach to parent education. It goes more than one domain. I think I have addressed it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think you have, Deutron, but I want to back you up to what you said a little bit about recruiting.
Yes.
One of the things that I remember about you guys at Santa Cruz is how you went out and got people. That is, you don't use flyers and you don't wait for the men to come in, but you really have to go out and go where the guys are in order to get them. Do you want to just say about something?
Sure.
About
Yeah.
that?
I mean, we had strategies, you know, from hanging out and doing a short orientation at the laundry mats to barbershops to
Barbershops are great.
mercados. Yeah. We have gone to, you know, popular shopping markets where we have set up a table outside. So with dads, is really the way to get into dads is their kids, honestly. So if you make it about their kids, dads will show up. And you have to, the biggest place that you can find dads is at schools. So if you can figure out to go to the parent meetings or ELAC meetings or any sort of site council meeting and just go and give a little bit of a tip about parenting and just get their appetite whet, and then say there's more, but you got to come to this group where I'm not just going to facilitate, but you're going to facilitate because you have something to offer. And when you respect and elevate parents in a way that they have something to offer, you don't have to sell it to them. When they feel that they have, you know, been put down or they did something wrong, that's when they feel ashamed and vulnerable and they don't want to show up. But if you elevate parents in a way that they have something to offer, because guess what? They have kids, they're raising them. Without you, they're just fine. But with you, they can be great parents, move from being a good parent to a great parent. So I hope that was helpful.
Oh, yeah, no, that's great. I just want to make one comment on when you were describing the tasks. One of the things that's really important to us is this is not a program that tells parents what to do. It's a program that presents people with things to discuss, with games, with role plays, with things where they put in their own concerns and issues and try, and as Carolyn said, to come to try and be the parents they want to be. So that's part of the way we think that this program aligns with Touchpoints, which has a very similar ethic and a very similar kind of approach.
And as Deutron pointed out earlier, and Marcia and Kyle last time, the parents come, they're the experts really on their relationships and their family. And even if it's not working so well, we invite their observations and their experiences so that we can work with what their lives are really like and get them a little closer to what they'd like them to be like.
Josh, are there any questions that we should deal with from the?
There are many, many questions, and we won't be able to answer them all. We, as I said earlier, will be wrapping up officially at the top of the hour, but we've all agreed to stay on for another 15 minutes. And so those of you who are with us, if you can stay too, we'll address more questions then. And we've got a couple of other videos to show you. There are a number of questions about resources. We will try to do what we can to put links and resources in the email that goes out to you tomorrow and on the brazeltontouchpoints.org website and on the Brazelton Touchpoint Center Facebook page. And you can also go to the Supporting Fathers Involvement website, and we'll put the link there for you, and it should be in the chat. We'll put it there again. There was one question about whether or not this is evidence-based, and of course, this is one of the best study programs there is, so I want to make sure you have an opportunity to speak to that. And then there are a number of questions, as there were in the first webinar, about domestic violence, and are there some couples that you would rule out, and what are some of these more challenging situations, and how do you handle those? So maybe we can focus on those two in the time that we've got right now, and we'll come back to more questions later.
Sure. The evidence-based one I'll deal with in a minute. We have some slides and we plan to get to that. The answer is yes, the program is evidence-based. We really wanted to not just provide groupie groups as in the 60s in California was, but rather to have a solid evidence base for the program. Are there any parents you leave out was the question. We do, as Deutron said, a screening partly together and partly separately with the male group interviewing the male and female to make sure that there's not ongoing issues of safety. What we've found, and I know this literature is very controversial, is that there's a large segment of couples where there is incidental violence. It needs to be under control, but it's occasional and sporadic, and that these couples are actually very amenable to being seen together. So we try and make sure that they're feeling safe with each other, again, through separate interviews. And if they are, as I'll show in some evidence, we found that the groups work well. But if there is what some people have in an extreme called domestic terrorism, is if there are threats, if there are ongoing hitting, if there are violence and injuries, those we need to refer those couples if they come into the project and if we find out that they're really in need of more help than an intervention like this to take care of that. But we do find that in the groups, and it's almost surprising, the amount of conflict from those couples who have been referred by child welfare services, that the group brings the conflict down, and they don't feel stigmatized, and so they're able to talk more reflectively about some of the issues. So it's not like we can deal with every couple who has issues of violence, but we do believe there's a substantial number of couples, if we're careful and emphasize safety, that we can deal with. I'm going to go on to talk just a little bit about the evidence then. So we'll go back to the slides. We've done 7 studies, or we or our colleagues have done 7 studies, so I'm not going to tell you about all of them. But the first one was really important. We had about 300 couples, Mexican-American, European-American. In our second study, there were African-American as well. These were not counties in California with segments of Asian American populations. So, and they were randomly assigned to a control group where they met with the group leaders once. And we had a presentation much like we've been doing now. Fathers are important, couples are important. 3 hours once. There were, you know, a lot of people say, well, you want to involve fathers, get fathers together, and fathers groups led by men. Well, we had fathers groups, 16 weeks of fathers groups, but they were led by both a male and female. And then we had couples groups where the partners came together. All had the same, the fathers groups and the couples groups had the same curriculum. So in the control group, what we see here is that there was no change in father involvement, and the couples tend to get more depressed. They tend to have more conflict. Their kids had more behavior problems over 1 year. We followed them from the beginning, 18 months, and we followed them 18 months later. The fathers group did increase father involvement, but there weren't any increases in child behavior problems, but there was an increase in couple conflict, which studies all over industrialized societies have found over time. There tends to be increases in couple conflict, unfortunately. But in the couples group, we were able to increase father involvement in the who does what of life, that questionnaire that Deutron talked about. There was no increase in child behavior problems, and there was a decrease in couple conflict and a decrease in violent problem solving as they reported it. Coming on to the next slide. We repeated that study, but I want to talk about the third trial of another 280 families. Half of them were screened for situational violence or domestic terrorism, but they were referred by the child welfare system. And what we found was that these families who were referred, as I implied just before, did as well as the community couples. In other words, once we were able to screen them for issues of safety, they were able to work on their issues and to become less violent, at least as they, over an 18-month period. So we were, and their violent problem solving declined, and their incomes went up, very interestingly, as well. So we do believe, and on our website, which you'll get at the end, there are reports of all of these studies. So yes, it's evidence-based. Now, we started off by saying a little bit that this was a personal as well as professional project, and Deutron was going to talk a little bit about that. What's the impact of doing this kind of thing on the group leaders and the project director?
Well, like I mentioned with the caseworker we had, but really for me, I mentioned that my father wasn't in my life, and when I took the job, I was really worried because I don't know anything. I wasn't a father at that point, and I didn't know anything about fatherhood because somebody who's supposed to play significant role wasn't in my life. But one of the things that was clear as I went through this process, it really helped me to personally heal, so I can be ready when I choose to be a father. And there were a lot of questions that came up. One was the appreciation I had for my mother and how taxing it was to be a single mother raising a boy. And that appreciation, tremendously, because usually what you see with boys against their mother is a lot of rebelliousness. And at the same time, arriving to the realization that this job requires two people, not the project director job, but being a parent, it requires two loving, caring people in that child's life, because if they have that, you saw and show your love, kids are really craving to have that different perspective, different approach, but two loving parents who, can support them. So in my own life, it did several things for me. First of all, I'm married now for 8 years. Yeah, 8 years, and 2 years will be 10 years. I delayed when I was gonna have a kid. That was intentionally. I saw one of the couple conflicts that we saw in the groups was that parents were not ready to have kids. So my wife and I really worked on our relationship before we had a kid. And that made a tremendous difference. So I almost did a little mini group with my wife saying, hey, let's talk about this. What are your ideas about parenting style? How do you discipline? How were you disciplined? So we start to have these conversations in a way it really prepared me. Second, there was this ghost that I was really dealing with, which is the absence of my father, which now I am more confident in being a dad, yet still learning. Don't get me wrong, I'm still learning because my daughter is my teacher, but it did something for me. It also got me in a place where I forgave my father, who hurt him in a way that he couldn't show up for me, rather than to say, well, he was an absent father. So it's really the transformation that happens is amazing. And then there's a question that always came, because when I was a director, people say, well, you're not a father. How could you lead a fatherhood organization? And, two things I would say. First, I would say, I was a child. So I know from a child's perspective, not having a father feels like. So I can honor that and create that space. And second is, I came really, truly humble to the people I facilitated groups saying, I am both a student and a teacher, and I invite you to be in that way. So now in every group we do, that's one of the most standard basic group agreement that we share, is we're all teachers and we're all students, which really elevates the space of even though there is trained professional who have the skills and strategies, but parents also have the life experience that they bring in, which is the most valuable thing, because that's what's going to help them to be amazing with their kids. So the impact of my life is just begun, because 5-10 years from today, my daughter would be the one to tell you that. But every once in a while, every month or every 6 weeks, I ask my daughter, how am I doing as a dad? Sometimes she tells me a silly answer, and sometimes she points out certain things that I'm doing that makes me check myself and go work on it. So if there are any fathers out there,
we're going to come interview her in a couple of years.
Yeah, I know.
Whipping by, there was a question about what are you doing in the pandemic about this? And we're working with our partners in England. The British government has sponsored a large trial of this, and they've seen maybe 700 couples over the last few years. They are developing an online version of supporting father involvement, which we're working with another group here to try out. So it's not like we can offer this program immediately, but we are in the process of trying to work out how something like this can be done online.
I wanted to say that in terms of the constant teaching and learning, one of the things for me has been how humbling it's been to work with and talk with so many families, couples, husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, grandparents sometimes who are co-parenting with the father, how if we create a safe space and there's no stigma attached to having some challenges in your life, how open many people become once they feel safe, and what they get from both what they're learning in the group, from what we present, what they discover, and what other couples are showing them is really truly moving. And many of them, we've had families come up to us in our town whose children were born in 1980, right. When the parents were part of one of those earliest groups we had, and they're still talking about it. And they say, I don't know if you remember me, but.
Or you should see my pie.
That's right. One mother sends us a Christmas card every year. And that's what one year she drew a pie and said, you should see it now. So it's very, very rewarding. It's hard work and it's very rewarding.
We are almost out of time for our top of the hour official ending, but we're hoping many of you can stay. There are lots of questions, lots of requests for resources, and you can find many of them at the Supporting Father Involvement's website. And I just want to take a moment to tell you about some of our upcoming webinars, including the next webinar in this series, where I think some of your questions are going to be answered. There were a lot of questions about what do you do if you can't engage fathers, even if, and I think you'll see in this webinar that we have to look at ourselves and our own agencies to see whether or not there are ways in which we can change ourselves to help fathers feel more comfortable being with us. So please come back for second shift to third shift, supporting fathers as central to family life. I think that's supposed to be second shift to first shift. That will be on Tuesday, November 17th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. And you can, again, register at browsebandtouchpoints.org, supporting fathers. And we've also got some other webinars coming up, also which address some of your questions about what do we do in this time where we can't do our work in person. We are in the midst of a virtual service delivery webinar series. This is the second of 3 series. So you can look at the first series on our website, and you can come to this one, finding the balance between work in the rest of our lives when it's all happening at home, for those of us who have the privilege and luxury of working at home. On Thursday, October 22nd, that's this week at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Again, same place to register, browsebandtouchpoints.org. It's the webinars tab. And next week, we have Mayra Alvarez, who is CEO of the Children's Partnership, who will be talking with us about current immigration policies and their harmful effects on children and families, and what we can all do to stop the harm. Wednesday, November 18th, Hassan Daniel, founder of the Father Factory, will discuss how fathers with childhood histories of sexual abuse can heal and become the fathers they want to be, and that their families need them to be. Again, come to the browsebandtouchpoints.org website, and you'll find on the webinars tab where you can register for these upcoming webinars as well. And I told you there's a lot of them supporting everyone's mental health. And I have to tell you, this one feels like a group therapy session for 100 people. And we're also desperate to connect with each other and to be affirmed in what we're experiencing in these really difficult times. So come back again on October 26th for the second of the series. These are ones you can come to all or some or one, and we'd love to see you there as well. So now we have time for more questions. If you can hang out with us, I can see most people are still with us, and a couple of videos. So Deutron, Carolyn, Phil, do you want to start with another video, or are there some questions you'd like to go to?
Can I quick?
Let's do questions.
Okay.
I wanted to share that we are in Santa Cruz are doing online version of SFI modified because they exist, and more than ever now they're wanting the support and need. So that's taking place via Zoom. Has its own challenges, and we have added like mindfulness as part of the initial part of it to ground people and connect, but that's taking place. So I just want to share that.
Great.
That is great, and that was a question that came up in a number of different ways. One of the questions with regard to the pandemic is, how do you recruit fathers? And so how are you doing that, Deutron?
So the recruiting actually has been word of mouth, and then really Facebook, and actually we're hosting several events through the school because the schools are right now. So if you're looking for parents, the best way to go is schools. The school districts are struggling with distance learning, and parents feeling now they have a full-time and 2 part-time job, which is distance learning educator as well as childcare worker. which I feel myself as well. So, you know, that's where I go, is I try to find the resources at the school district or school. So we're outreaching and trying to do a short event to recruit parents and kind of help them connect and use parent education as a way of both socializing, getting information out, but also identifying emerging needs for them. So the school district is responsive, as well as providers who are in the community can step up and provide maybe a weekly session on different topics like your organization is doing. Because what's happening is we're all in tsunami of demand and Zoom time. So you really got to be sensitive, and the information you provide has to be applicable to parents. So, you know, so that's how we're recruiting. We're heading to the schools, and my organization specifically also works with boys as well as the parents. So we kind of actually doing a parent-child workshops in that way to kind of support parents of what are some of the issues. But honestly, you don't even need to facilitate anything. Parents will come up with so much content that they want to discuss. They just need the space. And if you do it after hours, so the trick is you need to do it 7, 8, sometimes even 9 o'clock, when parents are done with child rearing responsibility. So don't do it at 5 o'clock and expect parents to show up, because even in my household it's chaotic at 5 o'clock. So,
you know, thank you, John. You know, you spoke to this just now to some extent and earlier, and yet there were a lot of questions about how to engage fathers. So there was one about, how do you get fathers to buy into what can seem like a lot to get into, multiple weeks and interviews? And then there was another one about how to engage fathers that aren't interested in participating in the program, even after you provide these ways of that they can be a part of their children's learning, which you'd mentioned earlier.
One of the things that I meant to say and didn't is that it's really important not just to ask mothers, although often that's how you get fathers, is that the mothers will be active in recruiting them. But often we get the notion, or the response right at the beginning, oh, he's too busy to do this. And we say, well, you know, it would be really great if you would you would let us talk to him about it. That is not to let the mothers be the gatekeepers of whether the father is too busy or not. The second thing is, we found that almost all the fathers that we have ever met in the course of these studies say they want to be more involved fathers than their fathers to them. And that's what we trade on. That's where we go. Stereotypically, I know there's the notion that men are not supposed to be involved. There's a kind of macho thing. But if you actually get to talk to men, they just want to be more involved. And so that's a way of recruiting them, is to reach them personally so that you can explore that.
We've found that over the years, as men in many, many different settings and cultures have become a little more involved, maybe not in the pregnancy itself, but sometimes in labor and delivery, and meeting their babies as they're emerging, it's making a real difference in the possibility that they would be caught by this idea that there's something that could help them manage work and family and the co-parenting relationship as well. I mean, it seems like a lot, and but they're sort of ripe for capturing if you can get to those ideas.
And get in early is one of them.
And the other thing is that 16 weeks sounds like an enormous amount of commitment. But honestly, when these groups end, and it is an enormous amount, but when these groups end, there's hardly a group that doesn't say, couldn't we go on? Do we really have to start now? We're really getting to the meat of what's really important here. And I'm learning so much and so on. If we can get them, and if we can capture them early and make these groups a safe place to start exploring some of the things they really, really care about, it works for many people. It won't work for everyone.
Thank you, Carolyn. Can we maybe look at one of the videos? I know there's at least one where there are parents who are actually speaking to this, to what
Exactly.
you just said. Yeah. Kayla, can you show, which video would you like to see?
Well,
I think she has them lined up.
Oh, great. Okay.
that one.
How was your experience of group different from how you thought the group would be?
Well, it went a little bit along the lines of what I thought, but I didn't think that I was gonna, with some of the other fathers in here, I didn't think I was gonna be, you know, connect with them and everything like I did, and I felt, you know, I still feel, I truly felt that it was good for me, and I believe that it was good for them too. Yeah, absolutely. I was, you know, kind of taken aback at how, you know, at the end of it, I felt, and how it made me feel, and how proud I was to be a father, and, you know, how this group actually helped me come to that realization.
Your participation in group has benefited you as a family? What changes have you noticed, perhaps?
We think about how we're going to deal with Armando more, you know. Like the questions that were asked in the groups, like, are we going to, you know, is this how we're going to take care of it? How we're going to deal with it when it comes, you know, as he gets older? And it's actually worked out. I think it's brought us closer.
Yeah, it has, for sure. You know, the whole reason why we came, that I came, it was because of him, you know, and it was the feeling that, you know, she was still pregnant with him, and then he was born during class, and then to go from that transition, that was, you know, it was very helpful for me, you know, because I was not scared or frightened or anything about him being born, but I was, you know, just kind of my only fear of the unknown, not knowing, you know, how well I was going to do. And I truly believe that this group helped bring out the best in me. You know, I mean, the best that I could be as a father.
All new.
I really believe that. I think the class helped us into that day, you know, the day of delivery, because we had class the night before he was born, and
that's right.
I was kind of a little basket case, you know, I mean, I just, you know, I was ready and willing, but I just was unsure. I don't think that I could have done as well as I did with the, you know.
It kind of eased some of
yeah,
that uncertainty.
I was, you know, not forewarned or whatnot, but I was.
Had more confidence.
Yes, absolutely. Good work.
Confidence in, you know, knowing that.
We didn't pay them for that.
Yeah, that's so great. We are almost at quarter past, and I'm wondering if you'd like to take a look at the second video, and you also didn't pay those parents either. Should we do that?
just for the first minute or so, just till he starts to talk.
Okay, great.
And you can implement many things in this class. You can keep some, you can not use some, but you have options that you don't have in like other structured parenting classes. Yeah, more. I mean, you have like she was saying, like strict guidelines that they want you to go by. But in this class, you put in your various ideas and stuff that's worked, and basically leave it up to us to determine what works best for us, what works best for us as parents, and for me as a father. Absolutely, and you brought out, like, we noticed things that between us in the group, I mean in the one-on-one between us, that we realize now that we didn't realize before. that when we were doing like the one-on-one thing up in front, and which has never been done before, you said, but because I don't know, maybe I just didn't get it before and I didn't understand, but now I know what I need to do when she's trying to express what she's thinking to me. I need to reaffirm and basically repeat to her what she's saying to me so that she understands.
I think the class has helped our whole family to be happier with each other and understand how to help them be connected and happy with each other. You know, when it's okay for me to step into their little situation, and when it's time for me to just stay back and let them have the whole father-daughter.
I'm afraid that we are over our time. I could listen to the three of you and all these parents for far longer, and I'm glad that we'll have a chance to hear more about supporting father involvement in our upcoming webinar. But one of the observations it's left me with, which I think we'll be able to think about more in that webinar, is how so many of us bring up all of the reasons why fathers won't come and why we can't work with them, and partners who won't let them in. And it seems like we locate a lot of the fathers not being involved in the fathers. And one of the things that I think comes out in listening to all of you and these parents is a lot of what keeps fathers from being involved is in our services, our agencies, and in us. And I think we'll learn more about how we can look at ourselves and change ourselves to really, open up to fathers in the next webinar. So I can't thank you, Deutron, Phil, and Carolyn, not just for being with us today, but for the really important and powerful work that you've done for decades and decades, in the ways in which you've changed for the better so many lives. And I think I can say the same for all of the people who have joined us today. The same thing to all of you. And thank you, wonderful Browse and Touchpoint Center production team, Ashley Gaddis, Autumn Strasbaugh, and Kayla Savelli, and to you, our wonderful interpreter, Maria Jose Gutierrez. We'll look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And until then, please try to stay healthy and strong. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks from all of us to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.